Well, we can go ahead and get started because I know I want to be respectful of everyone's time this evening. But for those of you who I don't know or haven't been to one of these before, I'm Ashlee Bolger. I'm going to be the moderator for our discussion tonight. And I have a great group of faculty as well as some residents to answer all your burning questions about rank lists and letters of intent and anything that's kind of in that bucket of towards the end of the application cycle, we'll just say is fair game. So we'll go ahead and do some very quick introductions to begin with, and I'll kind of just call on people that are on my screen, and we'll go that way because I think that'll go more efficiently. But like I said, I'm Ashlee Bolger. I'm at the University of Cincinnati / Cincinnati Children's. I'm the PD for the combined Peds Rehab program here, and then also coordinate a bunch of medical students that come through our electives and whatnot. So I'm going to go across on my screen. So Dr. Sauter, you're up next.
All right. Hi, everybody. Good evening. Carley Sauter. I'm from the Medical College of Wisconsin. I work with the team here, and then at my school, I do longitudinal advising for all students, including PM&R students.
Okay, next, Dr. Smith.
Hi, I'm Casey Smith. I'm at the University of Kansas Medical Center. I transitioned from a fellowship director to program director last year. So I'm on the newer side of the program directors, but have been at KU for 10 years.
Cool. Next on my list is Dr. Williams.
My name is Maida Williams. I'm a PGY2 at the University of Minnesota. I went to Des Moines University, and I'm excited to chat with you all.
Awesome. And then Dr. Brown is next on my list.
Well, guys, I'm Roshawn Brown at UPMC in Pittsburgh. I'm a fourth-year resident, currently applying into sports medicine, so I kind of know some of the feelings that you guys are going through now. So
cool. And then Dr. Kasi.
Hey, I'm Dr. Kasi. I'm from Chicago. I'm the residency director at Rush in this area.
Cool. And then last but not least, Dr. Rydberg, at least who I'm seeing on my screen.
And as usual, I'm last because I was the last person to arrive, but that is okay. I'm Leslie Rydberg. I'm the Associate Residency Program Director at Northwestern University, Shirley AbilityLab. I'm also the Director of Medical Student Education, so I coordinate our medical student rotations, and I do PM&R advising for Northwestern.
Awesome. Did I miss any of our either residents or faculty that are on our panel that are just not showing up at the top of my screen? I don't think so. I went and checked my list, but
I think that's everybody.
Okay, cool. So just one or two more quick sentences before we get started. So have some stock questions that were submitted. I'll start off with some of those, but please, if you have questions, put them in the chat. Folks, you guys can feel free to answer them in the chat. If they're like, questions that I think are going to be pertinent to multiple people, I'll probably bring them back into the big group discussion. But we can kind of use both methods and venues to answer anything that you guys have for us tonight. So to get us started, we're going to kind of spend the first little chunk of time sort of talking through we've done the applications, we've gone on our interviews. So how the heck do I evaluate programs and figure out what I do now? So that's kind of the first chunk that we'll sort of focus on. So my first question for the panelists, what is the best way to evaluate a program if you're not able to go in person?
I can start. I think definitely that was helpful for me was reaching out to different residents and fellows that were like able and willing to talk. And if I had like specific questions, I would ask them. And I think I got a better answer in terms of how authentic they were versus going online and kind of seeing what's put up, so like put up the stats. So I think that was the best way in terms of evaluating what I saw online versus like what's the actual reality of what they mean by that.
So anybody else have any other thoughts on that? Or
I think that's a great question, and one of the biggest challenges about the virtual interviews. I think that it's easier to put on a good front, if you're controlling exactly what candidates see while you're there. So I think this is where having really good questions on your interview day are really important. So this is your chance to, during your interviews, at the end of the interview, when someone says, "Hey, what are your questions?" Like, ask them, what do you love about your program? What are the best parts of the culture at your program? How do your residents or faculty work as a team? Things like that, things that will really speak to, what the environment will be for you when you're there. Hopefully in a positive way, to see what they like about their program. But, you can also ask them about things they'd like to improve about their program. So hearing what people have to say, I think, can be very illuminating, both from the residents and the faculty standpoint.
Take that one step further maybe and just say, like, if you want to specifically target like that culture or that like less tangible stuff, ask about it. Like, what's something you need to improve on related to resident wellness, resident culture, resident something or other? Because I think, we all have our stock answers, and if you leave it open-ended, you may get an answer that you didn't care about. So
one other thing that I've kind of noticed is being able to interact with people from programs even outside formal settings. So the annual meeting, AAP in February in Phoenix this year, or AAPM&R, being able to reach out to people that are programs. A lot of times you'll actually see the dynamics between program directors and residents and medical students who have rotated there. And it's always good to be able to ask them in a less formal setting as opposed to necessarily a formal interview, and say, what are the things you like? What's maybe something that surprised you when once you got there? But being able to see them a little bit with their guards down, I feel like is helpful.
I would advise the students, along with just jumping on everything everyone said, is identify one or two things that are critically important to you. So it might be wellness, getting a fellowship, just two things that are coming off my head. And then when you meet with the residents, like other people had suggested, ask them, all right, if I was in your program, and what is your wellness program? How do you manage a specific situation that you're concerned about, whether you've got your own wellness issue that you need to kind of manage, or your ability to get that fellowship? Because then you want to kind of marry what is most concerning for you with what they can deliver. And then secondly, what I would ask the residents too is, how did your concerns coming in change as you went through residency? Because it might enlighten you in terms of identifying what you should actually be looking for in that specific program. Instead of saying, I need to focus on wellness, and maybe every program gives you a BS answer, you can say, all right, might be on my own on that, and let me try to focus on these other things that the residents are telling me end up becoming more important as they went through their career.
I'd like to put in a plug for, I know this isn't like maybe after interviews are done, but as interviews come up, there are pre-interview socials that I think can be really telling about, first off, if nobody shows up to those from the resident side, that might be an indication that they're so busy that they can't find time to go, which is kind of something you should know about. And I also think that that can indicate level of interest and excitement that residents have about their program. If you are filled to the max with residents that want to go out and share the word about their program, I think that's always a good sign. And I think you can get a pretty easy and quick vibe about how the residents interact with each other. And it's also just a bit more of a low-key event. So as the season starts, I know that there's so many of those and it can be really overwhelming, but if you're unfamiliar with a program or really unfamiliar with a city, definitely go, because I think that there's a wealth of information and it's just a more casual environment before the interview.
I'd add just like a slightly different take. I totally agree. And I think everything that's been identified is really like great ways to do this. What I would just like to say is that I think there's a lot of online chatter about programs. I think there's obviously Reddit pages, there's floating around Google Docs, there's a lot of stuff out there. And there's probably some information that is true in there, but I would just urge all of you to use caution in looking at those online sources. Sometimes a disgruntled person, for a legitimate or not legitimate reason, can create a lot of negative chatter where it may not actually exist. And so, those sources are out there. But I would encourage all of you just to use caution when you read those, because a lot of that may not really be representative of the programs. You're better off relying on the types of things that everybody else has said so far.
Awesome. Okay. I think some of the questions that I'm like scrolling down my list, we kind of already alluded to / answered. But I'm going to ask this like in a slightly different way. But so how do you know if a program is truly serious about their wellness initiatives, support for residents, etc.? Is there a way to know how their ACGME surveys are prior to ranking a program?
In terms of how serious programs are about wellness, I think it's again hard to know until you're really there and in the program, but you could ask to speak to someone on the wellness committee. So we have a wellness committee. We have multiple residents who are on the wellness committee, and they would be the best people to answer that question. So I think the residents are a great resource there to hear what their experiences are really like.
I would, along with what Leslie said, I think most programs should have a wellness committee of some sort. I would ask them a specific question of what they've done historically for wellness issues. It doesn't have to be specific to a person, but they can say, all right, if I'm feeling unwell, like, how do you guys approach that specific situation? What kind of support do you offer? And the residents should know it. If the resident that you're talking to doesn't know it, that means that they haven't been educated on, which is a problem with the program. My program included. If my residents don't know it, I'd be very upset if they didn't know how to address their wellness issues.
I would say check the Instagram too, if you have Instagram and follow them. I feel like my program posts a lot of wellness things that we're doing. So that might be a good gauge of what's going on.
That's a great point. Is it really happening if it's not on Instagram?
And I'll just put in a plug for all the small programs out there, because I'm coming from a pretty small program that if we had all these, I wish we could have all these amazing subcommittees and committees at our residency program, but that would be the entire residency most of the time, because we're pretty small. So just think about what's important to you and craft questions. And just because somebody says they don't have a wellness committee, think about that in the context, right? Like, if you're a residency program that has 40, 50 residents, that's one thing to not have a wellness committee, but I have 5. So we don't have a wellness committee. We have a lot of other things, and my residents should know the answer to questions for sure. Like, you can probably rattle off 5 things they did in the last week that were for their wellness, but so just think of it all in context, right? Like, not every program is going to be the same the way they do those kind of things.
One other thing I would say is that I think it's important to ask, whether it's the residents or the faculty, what the resources are. I think Dr. McCasey kind of alluded to this, but if they don't know what the resources are, then they're probably not being utilized. And I would, to me, wellness is more than just when we take our residents out to have a drink or go have fun. Residents wellness is about what happens when stuff hits the fan, right? And so that's really when you find out what programs are about. And so one way that you can ask is you can ask either the residents or the program director, what's an instance of a time when a resident needed help, and how did you deal with that, or how was that dealt with, and what ended up happening? I can promise you that every residency program has dealt with some sort of problem. If they didn't, then they're living in a whole different world. And so I would just say having concrete examples of an instance in which somebody needed help and how that program assisted is very important.
Okay. So next question is, how do programs help residents get into fellowship, and how do I find this information when I evaluate a program? Is the program, and then kind of tangential to that, is the program I pick crucial to getting my desired fellowship spot?
Since it's quiet, I'll answer the second part. I would say, in my opinion, I do not think the program will dictate your fellowship spot. My personal belief is that you as an individual will create your own luck. It is what you choose to do as an intern, as a 2, as a 3, in regards to networking, research, community activities, extracurriculars, and all those things that will help you match. We've had residents who we thought were going to match into every program, had their own struggles because they didn't put their work in. And then we've had people that have matched at places that I didn't even know was possible because of their hard work and their dedication. And most importantly, their networking. You cannot teach the ability for someone to go to a sports medicine conference, meet everyone there, and then get into what they perceive as the top program. So I would not worry about that, but I would just try to find out if they give you some flexibility with your elective time, because most of you will want to do a audition elective at an institution to get a letter for sports paid, and otherwise I think that's the only thing that I would look out for.
Yeah, I mean, I would offer like a slightly, potentially like a different view on that. I think certainly when it comes to opportunity, like you mentioned with the electives, but also access to the different faculties. Like if you mentioned sports, for example, I've spoken to some residents that only has one provider that's primarily doing like MSK care. And so when it comes to getting like a letter specifically, like a letter of recommendation, it might be tough if you only have one person that might not even be in the academic space when you're kind of trying to navigate the fellowship application route.
Another thing you can kind of look for with programs, I think, is, and this will probably vary by program, but I think it's very helpful to ask about or look for mentorship opportunities within the program. So some programs will do, for example, a peer mentorship where older residents or more senior residents who are going into sports or going into whatever brain injury are paired with a small group or with another resident, and sometimes a fellow, and sometimes even a faculty, right? So as you as you progress through residency, you have some peer and then immediate mentorship, and that I think can be extremely helpful. So I think that is a sign that a program is, has some dedication to support and mentorship to getting to fellowship. The way that looks at different programs probably varies quite a bit, but I think that would be a sign that a program is supportive. And I would echo what Dr. McCasey said, which is flexibility in the elective options, and making sure there's enough time at the right times to get the experiences you need, to get the letters you need, to get the application prepared and have it be strong. So I think those are things you can kind of look for or ask about as you're thinking about how a program prepares their residents for fellowship application.
I want to give one specific caveat because I think it was a wonderful person that went right after me was right, and I want to just, the reason why I said it with such enthusiasm that it doesn't matter was that I've seen students weigh the ability to get a fellowship so much that they don't look at some of the other aspects of the program that are important. So where my thought was coming from was that don't let some of the challenges with the program that you think is a good fit deter you from going there, because where there's a will, there's a way. However, what everyone else has said is very important about needing mentorship and letters of rec. All those things are very important. So I just want to give that caveat because I didn't want to lead you all the wrong way either, too.
And I think that's a really good point, just, in the bigger context of, we're talking about how to decipher programs, and we'll start kind of molding into rank lists and whatnot. But like, it's not a perfect science, right? Like for most people, you're not going to create a formula and plug everybody in and then see who ends up on the top of your list. Like there's just lots of factors that go into it, and that's what makes it so hard. But there's probably not one right or wrong answer either. I think most of us have had some of those discussions before with the people we mentor is, in the end, you just kind of have to maybe X program is going to have a little bit better chance of making fellowship, but you think like, wow, Y program is, I'm going to be so much happier there for these 4 years of growth that I have to do as a physician. And so you have to really make that decision in your mind of what's better for you. So.
If I could just add, I'm sorry to hop on as we're
Mhm.
kind of
No.
transitioning, but I think also your job in this next step is to get into and choose the right residency. Like fellowship is a thing that exists and a decent number of people do fellowships, but a lot of people go into residency saying they're going to do one thing, one fellowship, decide they're not going to do a fellowship, or they're going to go in a completely different direction. Or people who said, I don't think I'm going to do a fellowship, actually end up doing one. So I think I wouldn't choose a program based on perceived fellowship stuff, but I do agree with what everyone is saying that it's, if you're thinking of it, like you can set yourself up for success by having, I think, especially had someone kind of maybe, unless you're an absolute trailblazer, um, who's done it before and can pave or has already paved the way, and the program kind of knows, okay, like we got to prioritize these things at these times. But first step, residency, because I like don't put the cart before the horse.
I think it's a really good point. Couple more just kind of quick questions before we kind of transition to the next group of questions. Is it okay, do you guys think, to ask programs or residents about call shifts, how that works, how frequent they are, how busy they are? What are your guys' thoughts from that standpoint?
Yes, that's going to be your life. I think there's a right way to ask that question. And you're looking for a residency. This is also 4 years or 1 + 4 years of 3 years of your life. And it's important to know how time is going to be allocated. I would say ask the residents. Absolutely. I think sometimes that can be super helpful in decision making. Every residency is going to have call responsibilities. It's part of the training and it's good learning. I probably gear more toward like how are call shifts divided? How much call do you take in a block? Like what kind of support do you have if things really hit the fan? But I would encourage people to ask about that stuff because that is absolutely a part of residency.
I say yes, ask away. I agree. It's an important part of residency. It's a quality of life thing. Definitely ask. But keep in mind that if you're asking in such a way that makes it sound like you don't want to do any work at all and you're looking for the easiest program out there, people may notice. So just think about how you ask it, because absolutely, the amount of work you do matters. Like think about what kind of your priorities are in a program. Like whatever's important to you is important to you, and that's fine. But just keep in mind how the question could be perceived.
And the other thing I would just add is every interview is different. The amount of time you have with each individual is different. And so I do think that asking residents, to me, that's a no-brainer. Bringing it up to the program director when you only have, say, 10 minutes with them, if that's one of the things that you ask out of like 2, then that may not necessarily give the best impression. But more importantly, are you really getting the information that you want, right? So I would think that in talking to a program director, you should be looking at big picture things. How is this program going to shape my future? How am I going to get the physiatric training that I want? And if the only thing that you're concerned with is what your call schedule is, it may not look good. Now, if you have 30 minutes, then that's a different story. So.
Okay. And the next question, this is sort of one that I couldn't put into a bucket. So this is just sort of in general out of the blue. But are second looks okay? And are there any specific rules that students or programs need to follow?
mean, in terms of rules, I think it's important to know that making verbal commitments on either side, well, it's not allowed for programs and probably not, well, I'll let the PDs say that, but they should not be offering you or guaranteeing you positions. The second look doesn't guarantee you anything. It doesn't, but it can be valuable, and I'll let others speak to that. But I think that point is well taken. That it doesn't get you a guarantee. You shouldn't be expecting to hear from the programs during a second look, really or otherwise, about like a numeric, you're my number one, you're our number one, kind of a thing like that. So I'll let others speak to the format of and other things about the second look.
I think we're still new in this whole second look thing because I think this is only the second year I think that it's been allowed. And so it's really, really, really intended to have no bearing whatsoever on a student's placement on the rank list. So it should really be thought of as 100% optional. You do not need to go to impress anyone. It will not affect your place on the rank list. And that is exactly how it was intended. So hopefully that is 100% true. I don't know that I can guarantee that, but basically it is intended to be for the benefit of the students only, so that you can like physically go and get a sense of a program so that it can affect the student's rank list. It should not affect the program's rank list in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, agree with Leslie. And so just because of that, just be aware that a lot of programs that I've heard of, and ours included, won't have you meet with anybody on the interview committee. We basically try to hide from anybody that's going to come and visit and do us, because I don't want to know that you came. I don't even want a chance that like this would bias me, because I'm human and that kind of stuff happens. And so we try to do our darndest to not meet with people that are going to have an impact on the rank list. So just be aware that you may not get to meet with a lot of faculty, depending on the size of the program. So. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about rank lists. So what do you all think is the best strategy to create a rank list to get the best possible match via the NRMP match algorithm?
I can answer that one. Rank the programs that you want to go to in the order that you want to go to them. So it is, there's no benefit to saying, okay, which program do I think I'm most likely to match at? The way the match algorithm is, the students should rank their number one program number one and in descending order. So rank it as what you want, ignore whatever you think the program wants, because the way the program is written, the benefit goes to the student and the student's preferences. And then secondly, rank every program you interview at, unless you would rather not match than go somewhere, because you don't want to look back after the fact and say, I wish I had just ranked that place. So think long and hard about not ranking somewhere.
Yeah, and I would say, not, I guess I agree with it, how like to rank and kind of how the mindset behind it. But maybe the question was more geared towards like, how do you, possibly come up with the features of the program? And what I did was, I looked at, program size, like how many people were in the program in terms of like pros and cons, in terms of the range of faculty that they had. Location was another thing that was important to me. And also, did my spouse feel like she would be comfortable, finding a job and being able to thrive in that location as well. So these were kind of like either put like a check or a negative, and that's how I kind of made my overall rank list when looking at all the programs.
To echo that, I think it's also really important to listen to your gut on this when you're making your pros and cons lists. Like you're learning a lot of stuff that is sometimes not tangible when you talk to people and stuff like that. So if your gut is telling you something bad, or something good. It's a tough thing to put down on paper, but if you feel really good about a place, you should probably listen to that feeling inside. It's particularly, like as Maida was saying, it's a long, it's a lot of time. It's, 4 years. And so feeling like you fit, feeling like you belong, feeling like it's the right place is important too. And that is sometimes hard to articulate in a checklist, but listen to it. And those other things obviously are incredibly important. And you should definitely do a checklist like that, but just don't ignore the gut, for good or bad.
I agree with that. I think that the first, at least for me, the first like 4 or 5 programs, it was like, I know my top pick, and then the next like 3, I'd all be thrilled to go at. And then I think and then you have like the ones where you're like, I'd rather go there than not match. But because I'm ranking every program I interviewed at, you kind of get a feel for the bottom. It's that middle ground that I found the checklist that Dr. Brown was talking about to be especially helpful, and identifying a few of your priorities. If you have a partner, if you have pets, if you know you don't like big cities or don't want to be in a small town, those are all things to think about because it is time in your life. And 4 years is kind of a long time to not be somewhere that you're happy.
So the question on this that people had submitted, I'm going to shift it a little bit because I'm going to let the residents have a chance to answer it first. Because the question is, what do the current residents on the panel wish they had weighted more heavily when they created their own rank list? So kind of a looking back, what would you have done differently? But I'm going to also challenge the faculty if you guys can come up with something, because I don't know. I think I definitely have had things that I've thought of over the years that I was like, I definitely would have done that a little differently or thought about that a little differently.
I can say one thing that, and I weighed it, but I don't know that I realized the importance was of having a well-rounded program. So I obviously went into a subspecialty. I decided to do, spine pain medicine, but I cannot tell you the amount of times I used my general physiatry knowledge, and I was not able to learn that in my fellowship. So having a good, well-rounded education is what separates me from an anesthesiologist, what separates me from a family physician, what separates me from an orthopod or a neurologist, is that I'm able to fall back and think about my training and the things that I learned, and what makes me uniquely a physiatrist, which is why I went into the field that I did. So even though I do a subspecialty, I actually use everything that I was trained on. So to me, that was one thing that, in retrospect, I'm glad that I ended up at a good place, but I would have weighed even more heavily.
I didn't realize how much variation there is in environment that you practice in, like academic versus more community versus a VA. And I think that I didn't realize how beneficial it would be to kind of rotate in and out of those different locations so I could figure out when I am looking for a job, what kind of environment am I looking for? Am I cool with working at the VA? Would I prefer pure academics at like a university? Do I want to have residents, but maybe not some of those university vibes? So I just think that that's a good thing because then you get to try on a bunch of different work environments, and I'm grateful for that experience.
And one thing I've reflected on personally is, and for a lot of our residents, is the value of your internship. I think sometimes people feel like internships are just like a step they just got to get through. But, I think really putting your heart into choosing a good internship if it's not categorical, and really learning the medicine as you go through your internship makes your life very, very much better for your inpatient months. The acuity and the medical needs of patients in rehab has grown and gotten more challenging over time. And so I think having really strong medicine skills as you enter and for those inpatient years, it makes it just a lot more enjoyable. You have a lot more confidence. So not undervaluing or really putting some time and thought into your internship and making sure you're not just sort of like seeing it as like a stepping stone.
For me, I think the two things that in retrospect were really cool from my experience at Rush was the first thing was the flexibility with scheduling, especially as my interests changed from wanting to do one fellowship to the other and then realizing I didn't want to do any of those things. Having the program support me to say, all right, you can go off and not choose your own adventure, but have that flexibility to build what I wanted to build for my career. I think the second one is a little bit challenging, and I want to word it carefully because we have categorical and advanced programs. I was thankful for being in a categorical program because my intern year was probably the most fun I've ever had in my life, and which seems weird because we were working so hard, but we would go out and have fun. I have lifelong friends, and those friendships were my support system, including my PMAR family throughout my 4 years, and it was just so awesome. So I didn't realize the value of the education. But then also I can call up my buddy as a PGY2 and saying, hey, you like cards, don't you? All right, help me with this EKG because I don't know what the heck I'm reading. Those things were so helpful, and I'm so glad I did my categorical. But obviously, there's the advanced positions are awesome, so don't feel like I'm disparaging that at all.
And then mine maybe is a little bit more fluffy, but I would just say, don't take things too seriously. Yes, you want to put thought into your rank list, but at the end of the day, there's probably a lot of programs that you will be very happy at. It's not that there's this one perfect program. And I think that's what I thought many years ago going in to make my rank list. And I tell this story a lot. And if you interview with me in the right context, I'll probably spill it while you're chatting. But I did not match at my first choice. And this was back when like PM&R wasn't super competitive and you weren't just like excited to match. I feel like we were all like matching first or second, choices. And I really thought I was going to see a different thing on my paper. And I thought my life was over. Like I thought it was, I just was like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? Well, fast forward 16 years and I'm still at the same place that I matched. So that's how that went. But you just never know. And so, I say it sort of jokingly, but like you never know what life is going to bring. And there's probably so many places that are going to make you happy. So, don't stress out too much about, is it number 2 or number 3 or number, like in the end, you're probably going to be happy at a lot of places. So, cool. Okay, let's see. I'm trying to keep us on time here. Okay, so this is probably more for the PDs, but maybe if the residents are on their committees, they might be able to answer this. But how much does class rank, board scores, more of those like number things count or matter when a program is creating their rank list? I don't know if anybody wants to try to.
I would say I'm currently on the recruitment committee, and I think things like if you take board scores, for example, somebody has a low board score, but also did very well on their MSPE, for example, had great letters, did other great things. I think you have to take it in context because I think those scores are meant to give a sense of would this person perform clinically well at the level that your institution is running at. And I think if you can find different ways, or if there are different ways to attain that information separate from a score or a rank, then that's what, at least, from our discussions and what we've been doing, that's what we look at as well, more as a metric, or using different metrics to get a sense of clinically where they are. So yes, it is important, but maybe not as important as you think.
Yeah, what we've found is that a lot of class rank scores, clinical scores, they're just all over the map. You'll see someone that it looks like they've honored everything, and then their class rank is kind of in the middle, and you're like, this doesn't make sense. Or we don't know if an honors at a program means that 70% of the people honored. Sometimes you can see those actual percentage. So, for us, we can use it as a guide, but that's not the be all end all. The other thing is, all the PDs here who have done this for a long time, I'm sure they've had a class where they had only people with top scores, low scores in between. And we found that it doesn't always correlate with the person top of the class being a good fit for your program. And so what we found is we're looking for, I think a lot of programs will say this too, is that personality fit. You might be brilliant, and I would probably be the first one to tell you, hey, you're just not a good fit for our program. You should go with so-and-so because their program is a better fit. So we look more of, at least for us, and a lot of programs will look for people that are motivated, that are not going to give us a headache, that are self-directed, and will do some amazing things with their career in life that we think we're going to be very proud of, and then of course take full credit for their success.
Yeah, I have kind of a similar answer, I think, to some of the ones before, but I don't think one specific score or how many publications you have or any one measure really says anything. To me, I'm a big believer of your CV and your application tells the story of who you are. Part of what I love about application season is I get to meet so many unique experiences and personalities and backgrounds. And the biggest thing is that your application should tell a story of how you came to physiatry, what you have to offer to the field, what you have to offer to the program. And I have seen all over the place, whether you're talking about research background or test scores or clinical experience. And it's more important who you are as a person and what your journey's been to get to where you are.
I like that residency programs in general are supposed to be moving to more of a holistic review, because I completely agree with what Casey just said. We should be doing our best to look at people as a whole individual, and I know that there's still, I'm sure, some programs who are looking at the numbers in specific ways, but I do think that as PM&R programs, we kind of understand that life's experiences are what makes people who they are. So I think that probably we as a specialty do this better than many other specialties.
Okay, we'll shift gears to kind of the last chunk. Kind of wrapping up with letters of intent or interest. Kind of, I'm going to use letters of interest as for that I really want to interview with your program, but I haven't quite gotten one. Versus letters of intent being, I've already interviewed at your program. From the applicant, you're kind of writing us a love letter to say that you're going to rank us highly in some way, shape, or form. So let's start with letters of interest, since that comes earlier in the process. So regarding letters of interest, how do you craft a letter to better capture the reader's attention? Any success stories? If PDs can think of, ones that have caught their attention. It's a hard question, I know.
I will say I actually have responded to letter of interest and kind of looked at application again. And to me, I kind of go back to, again, what I look at, what's your story? How is it that you are actually interested in our program? How are you interested in physiatry? What do you have to offer? And if there's something that I look through and I say, oh, actually, now I see that you put this in paper, to me, actually, I have looked at applications again. So
I think, from my perspective, I do think a letter of intent has some value, because at least Dr. Smith was saying you're going to review it a second time. And I love what he was saying about, I always look at the email and the application just to see if there's something that we missed. I think the ones that stand out for me is when they're able to name drop somebody we know, if it's from our program, a mentor or somebody. If they said it was, Dr. Bolger is my mentor, I'd say, all right, let me text her and find out, give me something, because maybe we didn't we didn't see the amazingness of this candidate. And the only thing I would tell you with the letters of intent, keep it short and sweet, keep it specific. I love the adjunct to the story you've already told, and be careful, because I've seen people where it's very obvious that they've copied and pasted it and the formatting is all kind of weird, even though the font is the same. We all know what that looks like. And so I get kind of disappointed, but I still will look, because I'm like, God forbid we miss out on a good candidate. At least they took the attempt to contact me,
And I guess that's probably better. I should have probably read this question first because these kind of go together. But I guess a corollary is, do programs take letters of interest seriously for those who've not received interviews or rejection? Does this trigger a primary or even secondary review of the application? So I think you guys kind of alluded to that a little bit. I would say for me, I'm in a unique situation doing the combined programs that we just have a little different timeline and a little different I don't even know, we don't interview that many people. And so I think, we tend to review everybody at the beginning. We offer interviews. So if you're, kind of past the 2-week mark, I've probably honestly already gotten through and figured it out, and you're probably a little bit behind the 8 ball. So we just have a little different timeline. But we also, when anybody applies to our program, send out a little email, basically like a generated response that gives our timeline of like, hey, we're not offering interviews until X date, and we typically don't work off a wait list, and it's just a little bit different. So I think I would answer that question a little differently than most, because I'm just in a very different position. So I tend to not look at them at all, to be completely honest. Every once in a while, especially if it's coming, from somebody like a name drop. I do think that pulls my attention in if you're able to name drop, or if somebody else reaches out on your behalf. I think that tends to sway me a little bit more, but I am in a very unique situation for sure.
I think too, just to echo a little bit what everyone has said, what most importantly is really being specific. And I think that comes for the letters that come later too, is, just a generic letter probably holds a lot less weight. But if you can be specific, whether that's a name, but I think also just importantly, like identifying aspects of the program that are of particular interest to you, rather than just a generic letter. Again, for both the letter of intent and interest, uh, is more helpful. The generic letters, they don't feel as genuine. And so I think really at that point, you're trying to have an interview with a specific program, uh, in theory, rather than just throwing the super wide net. And so taking the time to really think through why that program is a program you want to specifically interview with, and including that obviously in a succinct way, will get you a little bit more interest or thought from whoever's reading it.
The other thing I might throw out there that just sort of reminded me of is, and we've talked about program signaling in previous webinars, so we don't have to hash that all out, but I would also say to be cautious potentially if you're sending those, I really love your program, this, that, and the other, but you didn't use your signals. So, we increased signals this year. So it's not like you only got 2 or 3, you got money more. And so like, I think that can also be construed a little bit differently. It's one thing if you signaled and you're just reiterating it. I think that is totally fine, but just recognize that there are signals now and that may come across differently to different programs. Okay, so I have one last officially submitted question, and then certainly I don't think I've seen anything else in the chat, but certainly if you have any last minute questions, now is the time to put them in there. But the last official question I have is about letters of intent. After you've interviewed at a program and you're kind of crafting your rank list, does anybody feel comfortable speaking about how you format that, details, length? Do programs look at them? Um, Anybody want to comment?
I see the
Crickets.
chat. I think that you
Um,
want to make sure that first off, you're done interviewing, just in case you have a late buzzer beater program that you fall in love with. Trying to think when I think I was about a week before the deadline. Um, I sent my letter and it was, I think you want to be succinct because I imagine that program directors are receiving several and you don't want to just have their eyes glaze over as they read it. But I think kind of like with the letter of interest, the more specific you can be, if you did a rotation there, kind of calling on the experiences that you had. Um, and then just really reiterating why you feel like you'd be a good fit. Is it when you rotated, you hung out with the residents and you were like, you know what, these are my people? Do they have access for opportunities to fellowships that you're considering? Do they have, you know, or I think the more you can point out the things, the specific things that you like in the program and how you're going to carry that forward and use that to better yourself and contribute to the program, the better. So matching that stuff with being succinct is kind of the sweet spot to hit.
um, for I can just say for me personally, those letters of intent closer to, you know, what they're ranking, I don't put too much credence into it because I don't know if there's a clear etiquette on what students should and shouldn't do, and I think language gets lost. So I know some students will say, hey, you're my top program, and I view that as number one, and they might view that as their top three. And so we've gotten, I don't want to say burned. I wouldn't say that we change our rank list, but I've gotten like disappointed when I'm like, oh, yay, we're gonna get this person, and then it doesn't work out. So we just put our rank list down based off of who we like, the same way we would tell you to do the same. You can send it because you're only speaking to one person. There's many program directors, but be very clear. If they are your number one, that is perfectly fine. They should be number one in your list and use the language number one. Don't use top or favorite or anything else. And I don't think, in my opinion, you should send out an email saying you're one of my top programs, meaning that you're in their top three. I don't know what value that is. It's kind of confusing in my opinion.
I would agree. To me, letter of interest is more valuable than letter of intent. That's just for me personally. I'm sure there's differences among programs. The one other thing I would just comment on is if you do send a letter of intent, I've only been involved in two programs, the one I trained in, which I helped on the interview side, and then also the program that I'm at right now. And both of them had vastly different timelines for when they meet about their rank list. And so if you wait until the very end to submit it, there is a chance that your program has already agreed on their rank list and it's already there, and any letter is not going to do any good. So as long as you have strong feelings about a program and you feel like you're a good fit and you want to write a letter to say why you think you're a good fit together, I would not put that off because it is possible that they may meet and have a meeting already.
I think those are great points. Looks like we have about 5 minutes left, so I will just kind of open this up at this point. If anybody has any extra questions, feel free to put them in the chat. Certainly you can come off mute and ask verbally. That's totally fine. But since we have a few extra minutes, I'm just going to kind of open it up if people have anything.
Actually got a quick question for you guys, whoever wants to take it. So right now as students, we get a lot of information. There's, forums that a lot of students like to utilize that people can kind of communicate on who's hearing back from who, et cetera, and trying to stay connected and as current with the information as it comes. How would you say is the appropriate balance to stay connected just enough to be kept in the loop so you can kind of plan accordingly, but also not be too connected where you're stressing yourself out every day, you're freaking out, and the anxiety is just flying through the roof? And I think I speak for many when I ask this. Any good tips on how to kind of stay in the loop, but not overdo it, but then not disconnect for 5 months and then, see the outcome?
Residents, you guys have any more recent advice on how you guys maybe did that? Sorry, not to put you on the spot, but I think that's a great question. That's a great question.
I looked at those and I had to set a boundary that I was not going to look at them anymore because I found them to be very stressful. Ultimately, I decided that I was going to pick like an hour once a week where I could just look at it, sometimes look at the other specialties because I thought it was fun too. But I had to set pretty firm boundaries. I think this is a really exciting but also very stressful time. And I think that all social media can be good, but also can be potent. And it's kind of based on, I think, how you deal with that stuff. But I definitely would, if you're anything like me, which is an anxious soul, set a boundary, realize that like everything else online, people tend to post highs and lows. And that's not, I mean, there's a lot of lurkers who don't type anything. So already the sample set is kind of, I guess, tilted in a certain way. So just bear that in mind. It's not the end all be all. But don't be afraid to set boundaries, and also don't be afraid to say, you know what, other people can do that, but I'm either going to really limit that or just not engage with that at all. Like I have friends that were just like, nope, and they still matched. So I think that it's really kind of a comfort level for you, and that varies, but don't be afraid to set boundaries.
Yeah, and additionally, I think Peter, I'm not sure if you're asking like about like the online forums versus like how to stay connected with the specific residency. But one thing that I did was like if I had an interesting interview, like faculty was doing a project, I was like, hey, keep me in the loop on this, or there are, interesting things going on around that, or if we talked about a big event that was coming up, volunteering, like, hey, keep me in the loop on this. This was interesting to hear about. So that's how I kind of took it at that approach, where it's like, it'll be natural for the faculty to talk about that because that's something that they're interested in, versus me just randomly reaching out like, hey, I'm still here, consider me, kind of thing.
And I think I tell my students, I get these questions a lot because I've done this for a handful of years advising students, and I've gone everywhere on the spectrum, from the most anxious soul on this planet, who I might argue is one of my current residents, to somebody who just goes with the flow and nothing they read on blogs and whatnot is going to impact them at all, and they just think it's great, and like it goes in one ear and out the other. But I think recognizing yourself and how you react to that, and having a healthy mentality about it, I think is probably the most important thing. If it's helpful, awesome. After they showed me some of the things, I think some of them are hilarious. So I didn't have those when I matched, but I could have seen myself just using it as entertainment more than anything. But not everybody does that. And some people it causes way more stress. I had to tell my now current resident to stop looking at it when we were going through the process. I said, you just got to get off there. It's going to drive you bonkers. Like, I can't hear about this anymore, because she kept every 5 seconds coming back and asking questions because she was so nervous about everything. So yeah.
Yeah, we didn't have
I
social media back
appreciate
in
it.
my day. I'm older than social media.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, it is right at 9 o'clock / 8 o'clock / 6 o'clock. I don't know, whatever time zones y'all are in. But I just wanted to say thank you again to all the panelists for giving up this hour on I don't even know what day of the week it is, Tuesday evening. Sorry, it's been a week already. But thank you. And thank you to all the students for coming. This is always such a fun thing for many of us to do. I think a lot of us just keep coming back and doing these because we really enjoy it. So certainly reach out if you need anything. And then in at least a week or two, usually is our turnaround time. Amy will get this presentation posted on the website, and then I'll also put together a little schematic with some of the questions, although I don't know that we had that many this time, so there might not be much of a Word document to go with it. So with that, thank you. I appreciate everybody.